Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to this episode of Changing the Questions. My name is Paul Laporte. Joining me again for this block of tapings are my guest hosts, CJ Scott, a.k.a. Scott Fellows.
Hello.
And the salmon,
Damon Ravage, baby.
Jesus, 2 out of 3, you just completely fucked the name right
I still
up.
have a
Holy
chance
shit.
of getting it going 50-50 on this.
I'm pumped.
The Savage Damon Ravage, a.k.a. Evan Fellows.
What's up?
Joining me for this one, and I'm very glad I have you guys here for this episode, because the question that we are going to be answering today is, how do you get into professional wrestling? Not as a fan, but as somebody who actually wants to do this as a hobby, as a passion, or as a career. Now, both of you guys have been doing this for... you're approaching your first decade, the both of you. Officially, of course, I remember you guys doing terrible, horrible things to yourselves in the backyards prior to that.
We don't talk about that.
But yes, we'll leave that out.
The first rule of backyard is you don't talk about that.
Yes, we will leave that out because that's not the route we recommend for anybody.
No.
But so I want to ask you guys, just if you could provide people with some pointers. Now we were talking about this before we went on the air, and people ask me this as somebody who plays poker semi-professionally. How do you get into doing this sort of thing? And then anybody who's involved in it, their first response is don't. Yeah. So let's get that out of the way. But say somebody has not been able to have been warded off. You've not been able to get them away no matter what, and they're still persistent in getting in. What would the path into professional wrestling be to start?
Well, for me, I got lucky that we as a group here, we used to travel up to IWS in Canada before they closed. They've since reopened, so good on them. But we used to travel up, and I met Cheech and Cloudy up there, up in Smoke. And Cloudy actually pointed me in the direction of a professional wrestling trainer by the name of JP Black. JP is a many-year veteran in this business. He was the 4-time NWA Texas Heavyweight Champion. And he trained me. He taught me almost everything I know. As I mentioned in another previous episode, while I was going to that school, Bobby Fish was also at that school, and I did learn quite a bit from him as well. And I've learned a lot from just about everybody I've been around in this business. You're always going to continue to learn. But the best way is really to find a trainer, a reputable trainer, someone who... Now, you're going to hear... You always hear this from people who have actually gone somewhere and been someplace to say, oh, well, find a trainer who's been somewhere. Mm-hmm. You're not always going to be able to afford that trainer who's been somewhere.
Not only that, a trainer's been somewhere, that doesn't automatically qualify them as
No, of course not. No, but JP was trained by Tony DeVito. He did some TV for WWE, nothing major. He's just... he's an independent wrestler. And just because he's an independent wrestler doesn't mean he's not good. Doesn't mean he doesn't know what he's talking about. So for me to just have written him off would have meant that I was never able to get into wrestling myself. But you definitely want to find a trainer, preferably one with a ring. I have heard of schools where they don't have rings.
Yeah,
that's about it.
No, thank you.
So they're like, oh, well, we can roll around in the mats, we can teach you psychology. Well. You can only learn so much without an actual wrestling ring. You don't want to roll into your first show and go, hey, what do these ropes do?
Evan, anything to add to that?
Alongside with finding a reputable trainer, I think that's obviously ideal. Using the internet to find such trainer is probably one of the easiest ways to go about it, other
than word
of mouth.
This isn't the 1950s anymore, where you have to be hiding out behind some gym and some guy come up and go, I like you, kid. Come on, we're going to teach you the business.
Yeah.
And then they beat the shit out of you for 6 years.
If you can find somewhere with a bigger title-wise of trainer, I would recommend it, but alongside that, just... that's all I really got.
Okay.
For that part.
So in picking out a school,
yes.
So and like I said, this is kind of the universal thing of find a school. For the love of God, find a school.
Yes.
Don't try and self-train. Don't train with your friends. And I did MMA podcasting and radio for years, and this was kind of the same thing of like, yeah, Mick Foley learned how to do it in his backyard by jumping off roofs. you're not goddamn Mick Foley.
And he didn't either.
Yeah, well, I know, but he's that's the story that they like to tell.
That's the story they like to tell. That's the story they like to tell about with the Hardys. There's a lot of people that they like to tell that story about, but the truth of the matter is Mick Foley was trained by Dominic DeNucci.
Right, exactly.
Mick Foley went to a wrestling school, and he learned. He trained alongside Shane Douglas.
Yes. So even if those guys who started there ended up somewhere else eventually to get actual formal training. But
of course.
Don't start there. Don't even start there.
No.
Because it's just a terrible, terrible idea. Not only are you at risk of hurting yourself very, very badly.
Yes, absolutely.
But you're also at risk of picking up very bad habits and things that you think that you're learning to bump because you've watched tapes and you've heard things and you've seen YouTube videos of how to do it. But until you're actually in there and you're somebody who knows what they're doing, has actually taught you, you're not. So no matter how much you kind of have fun goofing around with your friends on a tramp in the backyard, a trampoline. I should specify.
Well, depends on how you're feeling on the day.
Tramp. You mean a trampoline or a loose woman or perhaps some vagrant you found?
we should clarify.
Let me just lariat this homo. Boom.
But no matter how much fun you might be having doing that, if you're serious about getting into professional wrestling, that is going to hurt your chances of it, both physically and style-wise, potentially.
And I'm going to say, this is going to not be popular, if you're not serious about wrestling, there's nothing wrong with that.
Not at all.
There isn't. As Paul made mention of, we did do the backyard thing before we were trained to be wrestlers. Mm-hmm. And it reached a point where I said, okay, I'm done being a backyard wrestler. I really want to go ahead and make a go of this. And that's when I started going to the Do or Die Academy. And it was a very long process for me. I had to train for an entire year before I had my first professional wrestling match. So, you have to learn before you can go out there. You can't just go, all right, I've taken 6 bumps. Where can I get booked?
What's my first card? Yeah. Would you have any beyond have a wrestling ring and have a trainer who actually knows what they're doing? Is there any tips you would give for people specifically as like what's like a good thing to look for in school and what's like a warning sign, like a red flag?
Actually, I've got one.
Okay.
I really think you need to be able to talk to your trainer and stuff like that. You need to find somebody you're compatible with, where you're able to actually be able to work out reasonable deals and stuff like that. And do you have anything to elaborate with that?
Well, there are a lot of trainers out there in the world who think that because they've done some time in the business that they can train anybody. Not everybody has a temperament for training. Don't go to a school with someone who doesn't have the temperament to train you, to teach you, and to be patient with you, because you are learning it. This was said to me the very first time I stepped into a professional wrestling ring. It wasn't even at JP's school. It was it was Canada. It was XS from IWS. It was a one-day thing where they were just they were going to open up their own school, and we went up there 4 hours just so I could get in the ring. Didn't have to pay. That was nice because I worked for the company in a lower capacity. I was ring boy and shit like that. That's how I got into the business. And he said, if you were already good, you wouldn't need the training. And that's something that a lot of trainers need to understand. They need to get that these people are coming to you to learn how to be a professional wrestler. That's because they don't know how to be a professional wrestler. So you can't just show them how to bump. Okay, here's a bump. Do it. And if they can't do it, you berate them. You need to have patience with the students. And if there's a trainer, if you're going to a school and there's a trainer who doesn't have patience with their students, maybe this isn't the place for you to be. Now, I'm not saying that the trainer can't be a hard ass, because a lot of wrestling trainers are hard ass. JP was a hard ass on me quite a lot. I remember my very first night of training at his school, I threw up. And that's when I went, okay. And I stuck with it. There are a lot of people who will go to training the very first night, bump around, and they'll say, wow, that was harder than I thought. I'll see you tomorrow. And you will never see them again.
Yeah.
Yeah, facts. They'll realize it's really not for them, because it's obviously you need a physical, you need to be physical for this. It's not something you can just be like, you're unhealthy and you just go and do it. It's not.
This is not a good way to get into shape.
Obviously,
what you're saying.
No, absolutely not. It's not a good workout regimen.
No. Yeah, no. You need to be physically fit and capable to put yourself through that and to be able to just be okay with it. Like my brother said on his first night, he threw up. But he stuck with it because he wanted to. You need to want this. That's a necessity.
This isn't something you can see on television and go, oh, well, that looks cool. Let me give that a shot.
Unless your name is James Stacy. But
that's a great attitude to have, except for the fact that once you get there, it is not at all going to be what you think it is. You're going to go, oh, well, the ring, it's got that, there's a spring under there. Well, I own a ring. There's no spring underneath it. It's a bunch of steel beams with a bunch of wood planks and then very stiff padding and then canvas. So you're going to get bumps, you're going to get bruises, you're going to get abrasions, you're going to get mat burn, you're going to cut yourself, you're going to fall and hurt yourself in ways that you didn't know you could be hurt.
And that's even in the softest ring in the world that's going to happen.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if there is a spring, it doesn't matter.
The spring actually makes it harder.
Yes.
Like you all think, oh, there's a spring under there? Well, that's great. No, because guess what? That spring is still it's about 10 inches across steel with a giant railroad spring in there, and it's underneath all that steel and all that wood and all that padding. So you hit that, and that's actually going to bump back up into you as you hit down against it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing I would mention, if you are looking to not necessarily get into being a wrestler, if you want to do some of the ancillary stuff.
Of course.
If you want to, be a referee, although referees a lot of times have to go through the training anyways.
Referees, it's separate training at the schools that I've been to, but it's still training because you still need to be able to take a bump.
Yeah.
It's a different bump than a wrestler.
Yes.
But you still need to be able to know how to do that. You need to be able to control the timing of a match. You need to know the psychology of wrestling to be a referee. Mm-hmm. You need to know the psychology of the wrestling. You need to know that you're going to be working with everyone on the card. Every night, a referee, very few are you going to see there's one referee in every match where they're all different. You're going to do several matches a night, so you need to be able to work with this guy. You need to be able to work with this guy. You got to understand his style. You have to know, okay, here's the crowd over here, but here's the camera over here. You need to not put your big ass in front of the camera.
Ring placement, absolutely.
Yeah.
You want to stay out of the way of the cameras and of the wrestlers, because if you're standing in the middle of the ring and someone's going to hit the ropes and you're in the way, oh boy, you're getting a receipt.
Oh yeah. You're going to get knocked down.
Yeah. And so if you're looking to do that, or even if you're just looking to do photography, to do cinematography, to do announcing, to do commentary, for those things, which is something I can speak to a little bit more, people think that there's some sort of like magic thing you need to do. Just find a guy and ask him, because usually they need somebody to do something.
Yeah.
And you can get in. Even if you're looking to be a wrestler, this is a good way to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely.
It just to help set up the ring to like, hey, I have this nice camera. Can I take some shots for you guys? Like, it's the same thing where or like I said, even if you're just looking to cover professional wrestling and you want to try and get somebody for an interview or something, ask them. They're just half the time they're just thrilled to be asked. And if they tell you no, then so what? You're at where you started to begin with.
You're not in any worse position.
Yeah.
And most companies that aren't raking in cash hand over fist, they'll be happy to help you out in that regard. Because anytime someone is willing to come and do the jobs that you don't have someone to fill, because when you're running a wrestling promotion, you're worried about, do I have my talent? Do I have my backstage? Do I have my security? Do I have my front office? You're not going, okay, who's putting the ring up?
Right.
You're going to assume that it's your students, but if you don't have a school, who's putting the ring up? You fucking are.
Yeah.
So if there's, if a group of slovenly people drove 4 hours to the show and said, hey, can I help with the ring? People are going to go, absolutely. It's in the truck. See you later.
All right, so let's say you've gone in, you've gone through some training, and your trainers and yourself will feel you're ready to make that next step into actually taking bookings. Mm-hmm. What can people expect moving into the professional wrestling life? What can they
networking
see come?
Networking is the biggest thing you're going to have. You're going to go to shows and you're going to meet people, and you always be respectful of everybody. They say respect the people who came before you, respect the people who came before you, respect the people who came after you, respect the people who came at the same time as you, respect everybody, because you don't know when you walk into a new building who someone is. That person sitting in the chair over there, you don't know if that's somebody who came with somebody who's just wrestler's wife or wrestler's kid. Or that could be the owner. You have no idea if you don't know. So you always treat everybody with respect. You introduce yourself, and you say, what can I do to help? Now, getting out on the professional wrestling scene, you're going to have to put together a resume of who trained you, how long you've been working, some notable matches you may have done. A lot of this is done online now. This isn't the 80s where everybody had to send out videotapes. You can link to matches on YouTube. It's very simple. And you contact promoters. Now, be prepared to be ignored, because that is going to happen.
It's a very common occurrence.
I can't tell you how many times I've contacted a promoter, like send them a Facebook message, and here's blah, 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 here's my resume, blah, 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 here's some links to matches. What else could I possibly give for you? And then you'll see that
seen at 11:03 a.m.
and never hear a word from them. And you send them a message back, seen.
Yeah.
Eventually, you just got to give up at some point. And now, you don't. Depending on how badly you want to work for a company, by all means. But don't be that guy who is now not getting bookings because you won't shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And if you're looking to do, like, what can be example of the schedules that you'll see as far as travel,
Generally, you're only going to run into independent wrestling shows on the weekends. Because all of us independent wrestlers, at least most of us, have actual day jobs. And so we have to kind of build our lives around wrestling. Or some people build their wrestling around their life. I, myself, am someone who doesn't wrestle a lot. And that's my own personal choice. I have decided that I would rather be a family man. So most of my weekends are spent at home with my family. Now, that isn't to say that I don't go to wrestling. I've wrestled in Vermont. I've wrestled in Massachusetts. I've wrestled in Connecticut. I've been to shows in just generally in this area. I'm not a big traveler. I've done Western New York. I've done Central New York. I've done the Capital Region. But I don't put myself out there as much as someone who wants to make a career out of this. And Bob Evans, Brutal Bob Evans, he has said that there's nothing wrong with being a part-time wrestler. And I'm someone who certainly takes that to heart. There are other people who say, Stone Cold Steve Austin said, if you're not in the business to be the WWE champion, what the hell are you doing in the business? I'm in the business because I love it, not because I want to be WWE champion. That was good for you, Steve, because you made it.
Yeah.
If you hadn't made it, would you still be saying that?
Right.
That's true. For myself, I do just about the same as he does. I'm actually, within the next year or two, I'm actually looking to expand a bit more myself. I've been contacting some other companies, and we'll see where that goes. But currently, I am just a weekend warrior. That's about it. Like you can see, if you're only working for one or two companies, you're really only going to see one or two shows a month. Really, it's like that's what an average independent wrestling schedule.
You'll get into this business. You'll get out of it what you put into it. Is what I was taught. And there's guys that I trained with who work several matches every weekend. And, that's good for them. They don't have a family or whatever. And maybe they do.
Maybe they don't like their family.
Maybe they don't like their family. That happens as well. But they're willing to put in the extra mile. You will get out what you put in. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to make it to the WWE. But when I was trained by JP, he told me, I will help you go as far as you want to go. And he has since, come back to me and said, you're my only student who never lied to me. You never gave me a bunch of, I want to do this, I want to do that. You just told me your very first night in school, all I want to do is wrestle. Everyone else comes in, I want to go to Ring of Honor, I want to go to TNA, I want to go to WWE, I want to do all this. Very few people have that gumption to actually follow through on that. Now, some people, they do. Hey, Fox Vineyard. That's right, I'm plugging Fox Vineyard on this podcast.
Yes.
Fox Vineyard busts his ass. And, I like Greg as a person. I don't always enjoy his company. But he busts his ass to work everywhere that he can. He goes to the Ring of Honor tryouts. Will he get signed? Who knows? But you know what? They know he exists. They don't know I exist, but that's my own decision.
Yeah, and I think that's important for people because I think that there is, there's two sides of it. Number one is that you don't think it's going to be as hard as it is. No matter what you think, it's going to be harder. But then there's also a side of where people think that you have to be, on the road X amount of days a year, and you have to basically give up everything to be wrestling. So those are the people who don't go in because they're scared, and that notion of having to be gone all the time, they don't like that. But there is an in-between. Like, you can just wrestle. I mean, no matter where you are, like, we're in the Northeast, so there's an abundance of promotions. But pretty much anywhere in the country you go, you're a 2-hour drive tops from an indie show somewhere.
Yeah, you can generally find them unless you're in fucking Nome, Alaska or some shit.
Yeah.
But
just do the legwork and do the research if you're interested. And like you said, if you have somebody who just likes the idea of doing it and wants to wrestle but isn't necessarily looking to become IWGP champion or whatever, there is a home for you in professional wrestling for that. That's probably the majority of people in professional wrestling.
There absolutely is. There's thousands upon thousands of wrestlers in the country. And how much does WWE employ at a time? 140 at the most? I mean, think of all those people then. And there's plenty of guys. We've done the last couple episodes. We mentioned a lot of guys who make, the Young Bucks travel. They're doing the work to do all that work. They're getting their money. They're doing the work. I'm not in this for money. I'm not in this for fame or glory. I'm in this because I enjoy doing it. And
now, to be fair, that's not to say that a team like the Young Bucks doesn't love what they're doing.
Oh no, I would never say that.
Right.
Certainly not, because you don't get into wrestling if you don't love it, because you do have to put an enormous strain on yourself. And it's very, very physically demanding, and it's very mentally demanding, and it's even more so the more you do it. So, the Young Bucks, they have to love wrestling. They absolutely have to. And AJ Styles absolutely has to. Brock Lesnar doesn't have to.
Yeah, I guess that's true, yes.
Brock Lesnar doesn't have to.
But Rock doesn't have to.
No. Not anymore.
But they had to initially.
At some point. They had to, because, you can only be shoved into it so much by your father.
Right, yeah.
At some point, you have to make that decision, is this what I want to do? And I've made my decision about what I want to do, and if you're someone who does want to get into professional wrestling, do not mistake me as telling you, don't do it. Because I would never tell anyone that. I would never say to anybody, do not try
we literally
to live
said
your
that
dream.
We said that on
No.
the show. I'm glad you caught that. I caught that.
How do you get into it? Don't. Okay. But would you also really tell people who want to play poker, don't?
No, it's a thing of that's like the cynic snarky response.
Of course it is.
It's the thing is the thing.
That's
with
because what I said. Someone who really, really loves it.
Yes, exactly.
If you're someone who's going in half cocked, don't.
Yes.
If you don't love this, if you can't handle this, don't. But you're not going to know until you try. So if you really think you can handle it, by all means, find a school and give it a shot. If you walk out the first night, you'll always be able to say, I tried, and it wasn't for me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to wrap it up for us, guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this. I think this was a great show. If you guys have any further questions, comments, you can get in touch with us at the podcast at changingthequestions@gmail.com. You can check us out on Twitter at changingtheqs, which is at changingtheqs. You can also search us out on Facebook and YouTube. Just search Changing the Questions. If you're watching this on YouTube, I guess listening to it, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave us some feedback. All that stuff helps us out. If you're listening on iTunes, be sure to give us a nice 5-star review, say some nice things about us.
Why do I get the feeling the feedback's going to be, who the fuck are these guys?
I'm right there with you.
And if you want to find out more about who the fuck these guys are, how can they do that?
At the Wolf CJ Scott on Twitter and the Wolf CJ Scott on Facebook.
All right, so on Twitter, my tag is at Savage Ravage 13, and apparently you can find me at the Salmon Damon Ravage. That's a fan page.
I'm going to go change your Facebook page right now.
I will be so salty.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Changing the Questions. Take care.
Peace.
Bye-bye.